Negative statuses are a new mechanic which have recently gotten the spotlight, so I'm sure that you have many questions in regards to how these work. Allow me to explain everything there is to know about them here today, so that you can master your knowledge on them. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. For starters, we should naturally begin by establishing what a negative status is in Wuthering Waves. Essentially, negative statuses are debuffs applied to enemies that can stack in layers. Each element has a negative status associated with them, but as of now, we currently only have a spotlight on Spectro's negative status, Spectrofrazzle. As the name states, they are able to cause negative effects on enemies. Otherwise, they are also capable of dealing damage. You can also regard them as a resource in combat, because characters are able to either produce or consume these negative effects. Units are able to deal damage without direct involvement, or even amplify their own damage output through the use of negative statuses. Something that we see in areas such as Phoebe's Kit, or certain weapons such as the Ocean's Gift. This grants negative statuses a very unique playstyle, as opposed to teams which don't have anything to do with them. So now that we have a baseline understanding of what they are, how do they work? Well, first off, the damage that a negative status deals is based on a few main things. The amount of negative status that you have applied, such as stacks of Spectrofrazzle as an example, any DOT-specific buffs, such as Phoebe Spectrofrazzle amplification, enemy resistances, and character level. I want to place special emphasis on character level here. There is a big difference between the DOT damage dealt between a level 80 and level 90 character, for instance. Calculations-wise, after a negative status is triggered, only the highest level DPS character that utilizes a status to deal damage will be considered in the final damage output. As of now, the only real buff that you can apply to Spectrofrazzle damage is shredding enemy spectral resistance, Phoebe's Confession State, and Phoebe's signature weapon. This may change later down the line as we receive more negative status-specific characters and equipment. Something that I need to make very clear is that DOTs cannot crit. The characters that utilize them may be able to, but negative status effects themselves are not able to proc critical hits. So whenever you build crit stats on your Phoebe as an example, you are benefiting the damage that comes from her forte abilities, not her Spectrofrazzle. We have multiple different types of DOT in the game at the moment. As of now, the only negative status that we as players are able to take advantage of is Spectrofrazzle, through the likes of Spectro Rover and Phoebe. However, if you go to the in-game tutorial screen, you'll find brief explanations on every other DOT ability. Kuro hasn't added characters which can utilize each effect yet, but enemies are already able to apply these to us. Here's a brief explanation of each of them. Havoc Bane can be stacked up to 2 times and will stack over time. When it reaches 2 stacks, all of those stacks will be removed to deal Havoc damage to the target, which is you in this case, while applying this negative status effect to any surrounding characters. Fusion Burst can stack up to 10 times, and when it reaches max stacks, a large amount of fusion damage is dealt to the target. Glacio Chafe is an interesting one. Some Glacio attacks will apply Glacio Chafe to targets. Each stack of Frost Chafe effect will reduce the applied target's movement speed. When you reach max stacks, all of these stacks will be removed to deal a chunky amount of Glacio damage to the applied target. Electro Flare can also be stacked up to 10 times. Its effects are different depending on how much Electro Flare is present on the target at once. If there's 4 stacks or less, the target's attack is reduced by 5%. With 5, the reduction increases to 7%, and the target becomes magnetized, which can affect movement. If fully stacked up, attack gets reduced by a chunky 10%. Then for my personal favorite element, Arrow. This offers Arrow Erosion, which can stack up to 3 times. While the effect lasts, it deals periodic arrow damage to the applied target, and the damage this deals scales on the amount of stacks that are currently present. This is as close as it gets to a true DOT playstyle. Then for the one that we're all familiar with, Spectrofrazzle. As we all know by this stage, it can be stacked up to 10 times, and while the effect lasts, the number of stacks it has is reduced by 1 to deal spectral damage to the applied target. Building up more Spectrofrazzle will significantly increase the damage that DOT deals. Much like Arrow Erosion, Spectrofrazzle is very akin to a true DOT playstyle. Also, a nice little bonus seeing as we know more about this negative status in particular, the damage increase of Spectrofrazzle from additional negative statuses increases linearly with each additional stack. This means that each stack adds a consistent amount of damage, rather than multiplying the damage exponentially. Neat. So based on our current understanding of negative statuses, there's some very clear logic to follow in regards to how you construct these teams. The core framework would consist of characters who generate these effects, and those who benefit from consuming them. Before, elements in Wuthering Waves were mostly a way to denote who could use what buffs, such as Joja passing Glacial % to Carlotta, or to denote enemy resistances. But with this new playstyle being a thing, they matter more. This is because, generally speaking, unless the character's kit states otherwise, units who deal in negative statuses will usually generate and consume debuffs of their own elemental type. So unless it's a very unique case, you will generally want to pair a generator and consumer of the same element together. Case in point, Phoebe and Spectro Rover. When you have this core established, your final slot can be filled by a character that either optimizes your current team, heals if you lack survivability, or provides some other unique sort of utility. Remember that Wuthering Waves DOT is very new, so we've definitely not seen the full extent of it yet. For example, slotting in Sanhua in a Phoebe Spectral Rover team, because she's able to offer her general universally good qualities, while also providing a lot of basic percent, which covers for the other portion of Phoebe's damage profile, seeing as she buffs up her own heavy attack so much already, or using Shorekeeper due to survivability issues. Traditionally, Wuthering Waves team building will center around one main slot carry, a second slot support as I like to call them, aka a character that is meant to amplify the damage of a main slot unit, and then a healer or sustainer of some kind at the end. Either that, or you use dual carry teams, which have a first and second slot sharing equal importance when it comes to DPS output, with a final slot generally being a healer. When it comes to negative status team building, you will follow the basic DPS support core, but with a special emphasis on making sure for the negative status generation consumption of the units work well with the rest of your team. When it comes to how you can see if you've successfully applied a negative status on an enemy, this will be indicated with an icon and the number of stacks applied under the enemy's HP bar. All debuffs like this will apply special visual effects. As of now, we can view spectral frazzles quite clearly in-game. It will present itself with golden triangles that appear on the bodies of enemies. Something important to note is that individual character kits are going to interact with negative statuses very differently. For example, Phoebe using them to give herself a lot of self-buffs, and Phoebe wanting to attack enemies that already have Spectral Frazzle applied to them to greatly benefit her damage output. So it is vital that you understand how to best utilize these debuffs to play to the advantage of your characters. Another example will be Spectral Rover. What I mean by this is that Spectral Frazzle applies up to 10 stacks, yes? It ticks damage once every 3 seconds, and after each tick, 1 stack is consumed. So, you lose a stack once every 3 seconds under regular conditions. In simple terms, if you see that the negative status icon displays 10, it will go down to 9 after 3 seconds. However, when Spectral Rover uses his resonating spin, which is stored within his Forte circuit, the negative status will continue to deal damage for an extra 9 seconds, while the stack count doesn't get altered whatsoever. That is an absolutely massive difference to account for, which is why it's important to pay attention to the kits of your characters. So now that we have a baseline understanding of how these work, we should discuss who is able to currently use them, and what gear currently exists in the game that is able to use them. First off, we of course have our lovely Acolyte Phoebe. We should all be familiar with how she works at this point, but don't worry if you aren't. I'll give a brief TLDR. She can alternate between being a Spectral Frazzle main DPS or support, either dealing high amounts of damage to enemies that have a debuff applied to them, or being an off-field character that focuses on applying large amounts of Spectral Frazzle. She uses the Eternal Radiance Echo set, which is a 5-piece that allows characters to benefit from Spectral Frazzle wonderfully. That's because it grants a nifty amount of crit percent and spectral percent when enemies have Spectral Frazzle applied to them. Her Absolution state benefits greatly from enemies already having the effect applied on them, so you would want another teammate to do the applying, which would allow Phoebe to thrive. She does apply a stack of Spectral Frazzle upon casting her heavy attack in order to enter the Absolution state, but she does not apply consistently throughout her rotation. Otherwise, her Confession state, despite not really having a place in the game at the moment, does have a ton of potential. She'll apply a lot of Spectral Frazzle to enemies, which would make her the most ideal support to use for any future character who deals damage by consuming stacks of Frazzle. So this playstyle is mostly just here for the future. Considering how new DOT is, it's very likely that we'll get some strong characters down the line who are able to use Phoebe as a support character. Spectral Rover is an excellent free-to-play friendly Frazzle applier that works wonderfully as Phoebe's main second slot teammate. In the future, if we get more characters who work based on consuming Frazzle stacks, he will also be a great cheap alternative if you did not end up pulling for Phoebe, as he will still be an excellent support in such a case. His Forte circuit, Resonating Spin, and his Resonance Liberation generate Spectral Frazzle. You want to maintain 10 stacks of this for as long as humanly possible to reap the most rewards. He also utilizes Eternal Radiance, as a sub-DPS is not shabby in the slightest. He can also use Moonlit Clouds or Rejuvenating Glow to support your Phoebe's damage, which are also extremely effective on him. He applies 10 stacks via his Forte circuit's Resonating Spin and Resonance Liberation combined. Assuming you're doing 1 full rotation, you get 2 from his Forte skill and 6 from his ultimate. So make sure that you're using his Forte skill twice, and because he can extend the duration of Frazzle stacks for up to 9 seconds, he's super convenient to use. As for any other equipment based around negative statuses, Luminous Hymn is an obvious answer, seeing as it was handcrafted for our very first limited 5-star DOT-based Resonator. The first half of its passive is tailored to your DPS Absolution mode, with the second half not seeing full use in the game yet, because it's more tailored to your Confession sub-DPS mode. It's a unique weapon, because you can't have your cake and eat it too. What I mean by that is that you can't stack both of these effects at once. You have to choose one, which lines up with Phoebe's playstyle nicely, as she too has to lock into one specific gameplay style whenever you're using her. Ocean's Gift is a currently running event weapon that works wonders for Phoebe. It is mostly tailored to her Absolution DPS mode, as it focuses on increasing the damage that you deal to enemies specifically, as opposed to providing any supportive effects. We also have a large line of Renacita craftable weapons which appreciate negative statuses, yet so few characters use them to their max potential at the moment. As Kuro explores this archetype some more, we can expect to witness these weapons come to light more. Something important that I'd like to denote. Carlotta's dispersion effect from a resonant skill does not count as a negative status. Therefore, the craftable gun is actually not fully utilized on her like I previously thought. Negative statuses strictly refer to the sort of playstyle that both Phoebe and Spectre Rover are currently offering. Just wanted to make that clear. So, how about future potential for negative statuses? Well, naturally, Kuro's not utilized every negative status yet. It's a very new playstyle, so Spectral Frazzle is all we currently have. It's very likely that we're going to get more characters in the future who can utilize all the other DOT effects to a great extent. We will also most likely gain more gear to coincide with the releases of these future characters, and over time, we will see these lovely Renacita craftables gain more potential as the character roster expands. Lovely stuff. We can also expect Phoebe to come into her role as a best-in-slot Spectral Frazzle second slot support in the future. Her potential for that role is really extremely high. The issue is simply that we do not have any main DPS who is able to take good advantage of her off-field capabilities. The same applies to the second half of Luminous Hymn. So, to all of you Phoebe believers out there, hold on tight. I don't think Kuro will throw her next teammate at us immediately, but we will most definitely gain her complete team within the next few updates. That's my guess at least. I'm a huge DOT fan. Toxic stalling in Pokemon, being a day one Kafka main in Honkai Star Rail, and any of her fast-paced DOT triggering playstyles right up my alley. This playstyle has so much potential, so I'm really excited to see where it goes from here. My personal wish is that we get an Arrow Erosion team in the future, where the spearhead of a team will trigger DOTs that are already on the enemy. Think about Kafka Black Swan teams. I'd be really down for a comp that seriously doubles down on the DOT aspect of negative statuses. Great new mechanic with a whole lot of potential to make team building more riveting. Good stuff, Kuro. How about yourself? Where do you want to see negative statuses go from here? Are there any particular playstyles that you hope to see out of it? Let me know down below, I'd love to hear your thoughts. As always, I have a ZZZ second channel. Head on over and subscribe if you're interested in some fun, silly ZZZ content. I'd also like to mention that I stream on Twitch. I stream once a week every week on Saturdays, starting from 3 PM UK time. Come along so that we can play Wuthering Waves, ZZ, and do some other fun stuff together. Hopefully this video was able to help you absolutely master your knowledge on negative statuses. This has been Juice, signing out, and it's funny how our first negative status limited 5-star is about as positive personality-wise as it gets.